the ocean's unfathomable depths, a gigantic, man-like creature appears. From the fiery depths of the earth comes a prehistoric mastodon of destruction. Never before has the screen known such heart-stopping terror. Starring Nick Adams.
Well, I feel he's very important from a scientific point of view. I'd have to cut off a leg or an arm.
Doctors, I won't let you conduct this test.
Frankenstein, with the strength of 1,000 men. And every man's need for affection that makes him a willing captive.
The chain hurts you.
The new scoop of the century. The horrifying touch of a severed hand with a life of its own. Terrifying force of a monster that dwarfs man's tallest structures.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
They're gonna kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
This is Jeff Markin welcoming you to another episode of the American International Podcast. And joining me today is my co-host.
You want to say my name or can I say my name?
You can say your name.
I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
It's Cheryl Lightfoot. And you're in for a treat today because we are talking about Frankenstein Conquers the World from 1966. A few weeks ago, we saw it conquer the world and didn't do a very good job. So now Frankenstein's going to take a go at it.
I like how you're riffing now. And this might be our very first kaiju movie for the American International Podcast.
I think The Amazing Colossal Man counts.
Oh, you're right. But It Conquer the World definitely does not. Frankenstein Conquers the World was directed by Ishirō Honda. The screenplay was written by Takashi Kimura from a story by Reuben, Bercovitch, and Jerry Saul. It was produced by Tomoyuki Tanaka for Toho Enterprises and Henry G. Saperstein Enterprises.
Frankenstein Conquers the World stars Nick Adams as Dr. James Bowen, Tadao Takashima as Dr. Kenishiro Kawaji, Kumi Mizuno as Dr. Sueko Togami, Yoshio Tsuchiya as Mr. Kawai, Jun Tazaki as military advisor,
Yoshifumi Tajima as Murata, the submarine commander, Takashi Shimura as the Hiroshima surgeon, Susumu Fujita as Osaka police chief, Peter Mann as Dr. Riesendorf, Keiko Sawai as Tezuko Tooi, Koji Furuhata as Frankenstein, and Haru Nakajima as Baragon.
And this film is also known today as Frankenstein vs. Baragon, but we did track down the original AIP cut, so our version was Frankenstein Conquers the World. And on our version, we open with the American International logo.
And James Nicholson and Sam Arkoff presents.
And we're treated to the American version of the credits.
Underneath the credits, we see laboratory equipment at work.
There are flasks and beakers. There are
tubes. There's bubbling liquids going from one to the other.
But the credits end and we find ourselves in a war zone.
We're in war-torn somewhere. We don't know yet. A field is coming under heavy shelling, and then we look inside a bunker.
And there's a scientist at work.
We can tell he's a scientist because he's got a white coat on.
Mm-hmm. He also has a small vat of red goo.
We can tell he's a mad scientist because he has kind of that mad scientist look in his eyes when he looks at his goo.
And he places his goo inside of a case. He closes it, and he hears knocking. He rests his head on the case for a better listen, but then he realizes that the knocking is coming from the door and not the case that he just closed up.
Man, what's in there? Next thing we know, a bunch of soldiers are bursting into the laboratory, and they take away the case or footlocker or whatever is containing this prized experiment.
Yeah, the man who seems to be in charge of this outfit is not wearing a soldier's uniform. He hands the scientist a message, and the soldiers confiscate the case.
I think I put down he has requisition papers for the scientists.
Ooh, I like that. The scientist tries to stop them, but thinks better of it, and instead places the key to the case in the man's breast pocket.
After they leave, the scientist fully gives in to madness and starts trashing his own laboratory.
What's interesting is this entire sequence is done with no speech.
No dialogue whatsoever, no. But we don't really need it because it's pretty obvious what's happening.
And we find ourselves aboard a submarine, and the case is being placed on said submarine. And an on-screen text tells us that we're in Germany.
And we see the progress of the submarine on a map, although at first it doesn't show exactly where it's going, just that it's going around Denmark.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, was that an East-West Germany thing? Because they're going the long way.
Well, they were going to Japan, so I don't know if they're going through the Arctic Sea.
No, they have to go around and back down and move through Africa and around South America. Well, they can go through the
Mediterranean. Yeah, it's definitely the long way, but I don't know if that's because they can't go through the Arctic Sea.
Anyway, the sub does travel to somewhere in the mid-Pacific.
While the sub is in motion, the sailors put up the periscope, and they see that they are not alone out there. We see a boat surfacing, hear a lot of auga noises. There are planes circling overhead and throwing down bombs. The boat that just surfaced takes a direct hit and explodes. Well, according to my notes, a toy boat takes a direct hit and goes up in flames. Now we're down in the sub. And I believe this is the original sub, where a bunch of crew members are looking at the lab equipment. And they wonder what's in there that's so important it was worth losing a submarine over.
Yeah, what could possibly be in that trunk? They deliver it to its destination, which is another lab in a military base somewhere in Japan, I assume. And the receiving scientist thanks them for bringing it here, but tells them it's too late.
The time for research is limited. He invites the crew members to see what it was they risked their life to bring in, though.
And they open the case, and it reveals that the case contains Frankenstein's heart.
Seriously. The scientist explains they sewed Frankenstein together and activated it. They stimulated his heart with electricity, and the scientists want to use it to learn how to grow simulated body parts. And the scientist says he's not joking.
The heart subsists on protein, and they hope to learn from it, possibly to regrow human tissues and limbs.
To me, it looked like a glob of mashed potatoes and chicken broth or something.
Unfortunately for everyone there, it is August 6, 1945, so all plans are put on hold because of the bombing of Hiroshima.
As seen in the film Oppenheimer.
And now when the film Frankenstein Conquers the World, it's 15 years later. And we find ourselves at the Hiroshima International Institute of Radiotherapeutics.
The building bears the scars of being bombed, but it's still standing.
Inside, Dr. James Bowen is making the rounds.
He's talking to patients and kind of dismissively tells his girls that he'll see them later.
One patient in particular, her name is Kazuko, gives him what they refer to as a lovely embroidery, and it kind of looks like a pillow with pins in it. But,
but it's embroidered pillow with pins in it.
So Bowen accepts this embroidery, and as he leaves with Dr. Sueko Togami, they discuss how this patient must realize that she's only got a month to live, because apparently you're not allowed to know at this hospital when you're on death's door.
It'll just depress you. Now we're in the lab where another doctor, Dr. Yuzo Kawaji, comes in and calls Dr. Bowen over to look at the microscope. He says there's double the amount of radioactivity in there.
And we get a peek ourselves, but we have to take their word for it. That's what double the amount of radioactivity would look like because, well, I have no idea.
No, it could be 5 times or 1 time. I don't know.
It might not be radioactivity at all. I don't know what radioactivity looks like.
It looks like TV static.
Well, this is what this looked like, yeah.
And they discuss the dying girl again. They're very sad about it. Both of her parents were killed in the Hiroshima bombing, and she lives on barely and is in a lot of pain right now.
The bombing of Hiroshima was tragic, but it's been a boon for science.
Yeah, that's another theme that's carried over from It Conquered the World, isn't it?
So they all must persevere to try to turn tragedy into happiness in the future.
Dr. Bowen says, it's ironic, but science progresses in this way. And Dr. Kawaji just says, uh-huh. I thought that was a great little sarcastic moment.
Later that evening, Sueko is walking home when she hears a man shouting. He comes running out and asks her if she saw the strange-looking boy who just murdered his dog and took it. and he says he thinks he's going to eat it.
Apparently a lot of people did that during the war because they were just that hungry. And we see the boy in the woods, both before and after this attack. Now we're in one of the best scenes of the movie.
We're in the absolute best scene of the movie.
A bunch of school children are running into their class.
And screaming.
They're maybe 8 years old, thereabouts. And en masse, they're all running into their classroom, excited as all get out. And then they see it.
Yep, there's a mutilated rabbit on the floor of their schoolroom.
Whatever killed it just separated into 18 different pieces.
Yeah, it was supposed to have been eaten, according to the story, but it didn't look like the...
Well, there's just fur left.
It didn't look like it was very hungry.
It left the head. So the children run in, see this terrifying thing on the floor, scream again, and then just all beat it out of the classroom. It's hilarious to watch. Take our word for it.
We're at Sueko's home, and Bowen arrives. He seems to be joining her for dinner.
With flowers in hand, and he says happy birthday.
He's wearing a kimono, but looks like he's just dropping by after his karate class. And he's a black belt.
Well, good for him. He can do everything. I like how he's coming over to dinner at her place that she made, and it's her birthday. Even though it does appear that they're in some kind of a relationship at this point, Dr. Togami still has to ask Dr. Bowen if he plans on staying on at the hospital.
He says he came here to help after the destruction of Hiroshima, but he feels that the time has come for him to return back to the States and start over.
He also kind of hints that he may have been part of the A-bomb team. But the more he does here, the more troubled he is. So he thinks it's time to go.
Just then, the sound of a car squealing comes from outside. Bowen and Sueko run to the window and take a look just in time to see a man jump into the car and drive off, leaving that strange-looking boy lying in the road.
He tries to get up and run away, and he can't. Sueko recognizes him and reminds Bowen that she told him about him earlier. And she tries to call to him, but he doesn't really answer her.
She didn't tell him at any point during the course of the film, so it must have happened off screen.
Now they're doctors, and there's an injured person on the street. So what do? They throw him a bag of food and then hide behind the curtains.
He takes the food and runs off with it.
In the next scene, Bowen and Sueko are having a romantic stroll on the beach, holding hands, when they hear a commotion from up ahead.
And there's a crowd, and it seems to be gathering at a cave. So they run up to see what all the excitement's about.
They find out that the boy, the only boy that matters, is in the cave.
Yeah, Bowen recognizes him as the boy they saw the other night on the street. So it's not the next day. Some time has passed.
The men are mentioning guns, and Sueko asks if the boy has been eating animals, and they confirm that yes, he has.
There's a policeman there, and he says, "I don't think I'll use my gun yet."
The boy starts moving through the cave, and everyone gives chase. It's not just a bunch of men and the doctors, now it's the entire village.
They have ladders, and they're trying to chase him up the cave, and it's kind of like a Scooby-Doo cartoon where he keeps peeking out from every crevice.
Crevice. Now that's a dirty word.
And sees them getting closer, so he climbs up to a higher level and looks out again, and they get their ladders, and it's kind of funny to watch this.
And then Sueko offers to try to coax him out, and everybody leaves. They leave her to it.
Well, Bowen first explains that they're from the hospital, so it's okay. And then
okay.
And then they all leave.
So Sueko beckons the boy to her, and the next thing we know, he's in the lab eating lunch in front of an agitated press corp. This is not helping to calm him down any.
No, one of the photographers snaps a flash picture and is immediately reprimanded for doing so because no one knows how this boy might react to that. And he does jump, but it doesn't seem to have too bad an effect, at least at the moment.
Right, he doesn't do the Frankenstein fire thing, so that's what I was expecting. Dr. Bowen insists, despite any evidence to the contrary, that the boy is definitely Caucasian.
Someone suggests he might be half-caste, but that person is shut down, and they insist that, no, this boy is definitely Caucasian.
Yes, don't you dare say otherwise.
Bowen then says that the boy has been exposed to a massive amount of radiation, and instead of getting radiation sickness, his body is adapting to it.
Even forming a resistance.
This is very interesting, scientifically speaking.
Dr. Bowen wants to know this boy's backstory, so he asks the press corps to help him. They want to find out where he was born, who his parents might be. So they are supposed to get the word out so that information can come back to the scientists.
Now we find ourselves very suddenly at the Akita oil fields.
Inside one of the buildings, workers are discussing the story of the strange boy who's now featured in the newspaper with his photograph and how he can resist radiation. The man recalls being on a sub during the war where they were carrying a beating heart, but he assumes that that heart was destroyed during the bombing of Hiroshima.
So everything else is interrupted because there's an earthquake.
Or is there?
And two men run outside to have a look-see, and what they see is Baragon.
They just see the flash of some eyes. All around is chaos. The whole station or model of a station is collapsing, but it does seem like something poked its head up from the ground, and that thing is responsible. But we don't really know what, and they don't give it a name yet, although it probably is a kaiju.
So now we're back at the hospital where Frankenstein is watching Japanese bandstand.
And at first, everything's going just fine. He's watching the teenagers shimmy and bop. Just some jangly guitar music. But all of a sudden, somebody comes on to do their Screamin' Jay Hawkins impersonation.
And Frankenstein does not like that. He rips the antenna off the TV and then throws the whole thing out the window.
It's like in The Room when Johnny says, "You're tearing me apart, Lisa."
Sueko scolds him, because that was probably her TV.
Those don't come cheap.
And she tries to calm him down. She gives him something to eat, because that always seems to have a way of calming him down. This kid likes to eat.
But actually something else has caught his eye, and it's in the vicinity of Sueko's chest. And he looks like he's going to grope her. But actually he just wants the pendant that she's wearing. It's sparkly, and he wants to look at it.
Yeah, he lunges at her. Bowen hits the boy with a stool.
But it does nothing.
It slows him down for a moment, but then returns his attention to Sueko, more specifically to the pendant she's wearing. But now that he has this pendant, he's very happy. He's positively giddy.
Shiny objects. Sueko notes that the boy keeps getting larger, but James just whines that they are behind on their studies.
But what could be causing this boy to grow larger? Could it be the radioactivity?
Well, they're the scientists. Then let them figure it out. Dr. Kawaji comes in, and he has some responses to the request for information, but only one letter looks promising.
He says they received over 400 letters in response to the request for information. And with all this response, there was not one letter that seemed helpful.
Except for the one.
Except there's this one letter here that might contain a slight lead.
In the letter, someone describes seeing a small child running around the ruins of an abandoned hospital.
This child had been sighted many times over the course of a year.
He looked to be about 3 years old. I guess they just let him run feral if they're 3 and above.
Yeah, because Frankenstein is growing and he doesn't know his own strength, he's been confined to a cell in the cellar of this hospital.
The dungeon of the hospital.
And he has visitors.
It's the press corps. They're back again. They want to snap some more pictures. Sueko's with them, so she assures them that everything will be fine, thanks to her calming presence.
The photographer wants to enter the cell to take pictures with him, and Sueko allows it.
Frank indicates that he's hungry, and Sueko says she'll feed him later.
Now upstairs, there's a debate going on between Dr. Kawaji and the administrator of this hospital on what would be the best way to care for this boy. He's becoming too large to stay where he is.
And they can't build him a bigger cell. They don't have the funds, and it would take too long.
The administrator suggests they could take him to the zoo.
And Kawaji gets really offended. He's not an animal.
But before he can really argue, Kawaji is called away, and he's been called to meet Mr. Kawai.
It turns out that Kawai was the man who delivered the heart to that hospital in Hiroshima back in 1946, and it's the very hospital where the little boy was seen running around. He tells the scientists about the heart, how it was bathed in liquid, and it was supposed to be the subject of future experiments on immortality due to a protein process that could help the scientists learn how to do the same for human cells. Dr. Bowen says that we need to get in touch with the scientists who were working on it at the time.
Dr. Kawaji goes to Frankfurt to visit Dr. Riesendorf. Dr. Riesendorf was that mad scientist we saw all the way back at the beginning of the film.
He's a lot older now. Riesendorf asks if they want to know if their creature was formed by Frankenstein's heart, by a process that we're not entirely sure how it worked. Dr. Kawaji says yes. And Riesendorf says Frankenstein was murdered many times, und yet his body always came to life again. His heart never died, and if the protein supply is sufficient, the body will be rebuilt by the active work of the cells. Say if he lost his arms, new ones would grow back.
So Riesendorf suggests that in order to find out whether or not this boy is the Frankenstein monster, one must simply cut off his limbs to see if they remain alive. And new limbs will also grow in their place.
I wondered if they cut off the arm, will the new Frankenstein grow from the severed arm, as well as a new arm growing from the severed Frankenstein? We're not going to know the answer to that question, though.
Wasn't that the plot of Army of Frankensteins?
I didn't see that.
I did not either, but it could have been.
It should have been.
So back at the hospital, Sueko is bringing Frankenstein some food, and he's overjoyed to be eating.
She asks about his chains. She wonders if they're too tight, but he doesn't seem to be bothered by them.
Nevertheless, she says that she's going to look into getting a new one for him.
Plot point.
Now Kawaji is back from his trip to Frankfurt, and he has been discussing what he learned with Dr. Bowen when Sueko enters.
He very rightly figures Sueko will be opposed to this scientific experiment. After he explains what they want to do, Sueko does indeed object. What if they don't grow back?
And Sueko reminds Kawaji that he himself had said the boy was human when he objected to placing him in a zoo.
But Kawaji kind of backtracks on that sentiment, saying that he's really more of a gorilla than a human.
So in that case, it should be okay to cut off a limb or two, in the interest of science.
Sueko's not having any of that. She says even Frankenstein was human, or at least his heart was. And Bowen kind of tables the motion. They'll think about it for a little while.
So now we're away from the hospital, and this time Dr. Bowen is cooking for Sueko.
Finally.
He's wearing a chef's hat with an apron that says barbecue, but there's a big black X over the BQ.
So it's just bar? He's trying to demonstrate how to cook beef. I don't know. He's a scientist. I guess he has a scientific method. They wonder where Kawaji is. I believe he's supposed to be joining them.
And Sueko says that he had some work to do.
Well, apparently that work was back at the lab, taking a giant syringe of something to the boy. He doesn't have the heart to inject the boy, though, so he just downs a shot of some kind of alcohol.
Then a film crew arrives, and they start shooting with their cameras.
But they don't want just a shot of the boy sitting still in the cell. They want to see him get riled up a bit. It makes for a better picture.
So fortunately for them, the lights are having a negative effect on Frankenstein.
Yes, he's really upset, and he starts pulling at his chains.
Then Kawaji evacuates the film crew. Then a call is made to Sueko. They're looking for Bowen. And then with absolutely no communication, Bowen knows what's up. He throws on his jacket and heads out.
Everyone's at the lab where Bowen is leading the team, armed with big red fire extinguishers. I'm not really sure. And they're waiting for the boy to come out of his cage. He's thrown off the actual bars of the cell, but he's still sitting in there.
Yeah, the plan is to aim the fire extinguisher at his eyes and blind him because they just want to incapacitate him. They don't want to hurt him.
Oh, okay. Well, by now he has actually killed some of the reporters. We see them lying under the rubble that he created when he burst open his cell.
But he's happily eating, so he's not coming out of his cell anytime soon.
Until the army starts to shoot. Dr. Bowen protests, but they're going in anyways, guns a-blazing. And this is what finally gets the boy to get up and try to leave.
Yeah, he breaks through the wall and runs into the night.
He makes a gesture at everyone before he leaves, and I wrote down he flipped the bird at them in his own Caucasian way.
So Sueko is listening to a news report about all this on the radio. And it says the controversial and dangerous monster has escaped into the night.
But she doesn't have to wonder very long about what happened to him, because the next thing we know, we see his eyeball looking into her window.
Yep. It's fortunate that her apartment is right at his eye level.
It's like a King Kong movie where the monster is looking in on his lady love.
Or the amazing colossal man is looking at a woman in the shower.
It doesn't seem as perverted as that.
Well, Sueko asks if he's all right, but then there are the sounds of sirens, and Frankenstein runs away.
She's afraid he's going to be killed, and she goes after him, but she can't really catch up to him. Sirens are blaring as a car approaches. Frank runs in front of the car. That makes the car spin out and hit an embankment.
The doctors are all hoping that Frankenstein be captured instead of killed so that they can continue their research. There are a couple of investigative reporters who sneak downstairs to check out the cell. They have a theory that maybe Frankenstein's escape was due to negligence on the part of the doctors.
Maybe it's because Dr. Togami made his chains a little looser. But that's not really what happened. We saw what happened.
They look at the chain. The cuff isn't broken.
So maybe it was too big, even though it's barely larger than the man's wrist that's holding it.
But they're about to leave when they notice the crawling hand of Frankenstein.
Wow. It's probably crawling towards its own movie called The Crawling Hand. They freak out and run away.
They run upstairs to report it to the doctors, who rush down to see this for themselves.
But where is it?
They look around and they do find it.
Crawling towards the trash cans.
Kawaji places the hand in liquid protein in an attempt to try to keep it alive.
Well, now it's official. The police chiefs say they have to kill this creature. Even if, with Sueko's help, they captured him alive, they'd have nowhere to put him.
A call comes in that a dog has been killed and eaten in Okayama. So that's where the police are headed now.
I mean, no one else is going to kill and eat a dog, right? So in Okayama, the news is blaring. Frankenstein has been spotted. He avoids people during the day and hangs out in the woods. And he only comes out at night, apparently. They want the populace to contact the police if they see him and stay indoors otherwise. Then we go to a police station where a cop notes that Frankenstein is now larger than 10 humans and getting bigger, says the other cop. If he's so big, why can't you find him? Asks their commander. And they say because he thinks like a human. That's how he manages to evade us. And then they ask the commander if they can have some tanks. And the commander says that's under investigation. They really want to stop him tonight, though. Then we go to the lab where the hand is glistening in a protein bath. They note that the hand is moving on its own and that the nails are growing. It's just got to have enough nourishment for this to happen.
In the village of Himeji, two women are joking about meeting the monster. And as they go to milk the cow that morning, they find that the cow has been eaten. So it's apparent that Frankenstein is nearby.
And now we're in Osaka. Boy, this kid gets around. The army's planning an attack. The scientists arrive for a consultation, and the general announces that Frankenstein is there and asks Bowen why, and Bowen has no idea.
The scientists relent that it's inevitable that Frankenstein has to be killed as retribution for the damage he's caused, but at least they have his hand.
Yep, that's pretty good. They got a little something out of the deal, I guess.
So now it's night, and we see a cruise ship. There's a party going on.
It's a party boat. Everyone's dancing, but the ship's crew notes there's a disturbance in the water.
There's something in the water, they say, and from the water rises Frankenstein.
The partygoers go hysterical, and everyone rushes to the side of the boat to look at him.
Yeah, he grabs the boat, and people start to panic, but then he just goes back under the water.
Now we're back with Bowen and the other scientists, and Bowen suggests that they should just go home now. The matter's beyond their control, and besides, they do have that sweet hand.
So they return back to their lab, only to find that the hand is gone.
Yeah, everyone's in a tizzy.
Everybody's looking around, and they do find it, but it's too late. It's dead. And they realize that it grew too large for the amount of protein they had left for it.
Yeah, it's like leaving your cat alone without enough food. It just starved to death.
It crawled off looking for more food, and...
well, there weren't any other protein baths handy, I guess.
And Frankenstein's hungry, too.
He's strolling through the pines. He hears the cries of a large bird.
He throws a tree at it, but misses.
He hits somebody's A-frame house.
Yeah, he doesn't miss the house. And then he sees a boar.
I put warthog. Just an excellent special effect here. It's a toy boar on a track, and you can see the tracks, and it's pivoting about.
Frankenstein has a plan to catch this boar. He starts digging a hole. And now Frankenstein notices that from his vantage point, he can see the people in the town below. And he watches as the people come together in formation. And it's soldiers, and it seems that they're coming for him. And tanks are headed up the mountain as well. Frankenstein goes back to trying to catch his boar, but one of the tanks drives into the hole that Frankenstein had dug. That's it. It's another pointless thing, but that's what happened.
Okay. And now another cut. We're in the lab again. The three scientists are figuring out that if Frankenstein stays close to the base of the mountain, because that's where the food is, Dr. Bowen predicts that somehow he'll be caught.
Bowen believes they can head Frankenstein off halfway up Mount Fuji. If they can get enough food there to satisfy him, he should settle down and stay put.
All right, there's a new scene. We're at a house party. Inside, a girl hears something. Is it an avalanche? Nope, it's just Baragon awaking from his slumber to terrorize everyone. He smashes his way through the outbuildings. He goes crashing through the town, pretty much wrecking the whole place.
The next day, soldiers and doctors arrive to find this abandoned and destroyed town. And not knowing who else to blame, they attribute the damage to Frankenstein.
The scientists are getting grilled by the army. Are you sure we shouldn't kill Frankenstein? They are sure. And Dr. Kawaji says Frank could have done the damage that we know was caused by Baragon, but he had no time to get there.
Now we see some workers in a cave, and there's a light down below where there shouldn't be one. And we recognize it as the horn on Baragon's head. It glows, but they don't know about Baragon, so they don't know what it is. They think someone's down there, but they don't want to go down to check it out because they're worried about noxious fumes. Again, that's it. Okay. It's just a thrown-in scene.
There's a lot of throwaway scenes. Now we're back with our science team, and they're in a helicopter. They're taking a ride over where Frankenstein's food drop is, and they note that the food has not been eaten yet.
Here's a quick little montage of Baragon doing more damage. He's eating pigs and chickens and horse puppets.
The special effects of this are so special.
Well, usually if you can do a close-up of an animal and then do a wide shot with a puppet replacing it, you want to do a close-up of a real animal to kind of at least give the viewer a chance to suspend their disbelief.
Yeah, but the special effects guy, and I have it in my notes later, but he didn't care. He just didn't care.
So now we're with two schoolboys returning home from their day at school and find that their house has been wrecked.
Yes, these boys, one of them has the deepest voice I've ever heard, and the other one sounds like a young lady. They wonder where their parents have got to, and they imagine they're in a nearby cave, so they run there.
They don't find their parents. Instead, they find Frankenstein.
He's not trying to do anything to them, but they do see him, and they kind of freeze in fear.
I guess they eventually were able to inform somebody because soldiers and doctors arrive.
Boy, those scientists get around. They're in every scene practically. One of the army men notes that the cave used to be a powder magazine during the war, so it's 2 kilometers deep, which is pretty deep. The army rushes in, and so does everybody else. Frankenstein is still hiding. The army opens fire, but that just makes Frankenstein angry. So they can't decide whether to keep firing or not, but Frankenstein is coming at them, so they just run away. I guess they retreat to a better position. He snarls at them, and they shoot. It has no effect, so Frankenstein runs away.
Doctors Bowen and Kawaji and Sueko are in despair. It seems there is going to be no way to prevent Frankenstein from being killed because so much damage has been done in his name.
You know, I kind of thought they already decided to kill him, and it seems like they're still vacillating. They're going back and forth on what to do.
But then Mr. Kawai returns.
He's our great exposition guy because he knows everything that no one else knows in this movie.
Yep, he comes in and says, there may be a second monster running around.
And how do I know this? Because when that earthquake happened at Akita oil fields, I saw another monster.
And the monster that I saw more closely matches the description of the monster that others had seen, as opposed to the description of the Frankenstein monster.
It's because unlike Frankenstein, who has to travel overland, this monster is a burrower. It goes underground. That's why the miners in the cave saw it. So hooray, Frankenstein does not need to be killed.
The doctors send Kawai off to tell others of his revelation.
Yeah, the others being the reporters, because they're the most important deciding body in this whole governmental structure.
But unfortunately, he's laughed at and disregarded everywhere he goes.
Yeah, he talks to another scientist, I think a geologist, and he talks to a dinosaur expert. And this is just sort of a montage, and they all just shake their heads at him. The dinosaur expert says there's no way some Mesozoic creature is burrowing underground. He says it's entirely ridiculous.
So Kawai has to go back to Doctors Bowen and Kawaji and Sueko and explain how he has failed.
And they're patting him on the head. Well, you tried. Kawai says he's going to try and save up some money so that he can return and do the good work that he's doing all over again. And Bowen notes that, they're also kind of running out of money. Their funding is drying up.
Yeah, it's expensive to rent a helicopter on a daily basis.
And all that food that they have to drop.
But nonetheless, it's time to go up on the helicopter again.
Sueko says that the hospital needs her to come back and actually do her job for a while, too.
But the money isn't completely gone. So it's time to go up on another helicopter excursion.
This time they find out that the food has been eaten.
So they drop off more at that same location.
And we see Frankenstein pick it up and take it back to his cave. And the science team says that it's about time for them to go down to the mountain and look around.
Yep, they're going to travel on foot. And Sueko is certain that Frankenstein will remember her when they do find him.
They're always so arrogant about their attachment to giant monsters, aren't they?
Unfortunately, it doesn't take too long before they find themselves lost. And none of them knows how to read a map or a compass.
I think it's separated, too, which is even worse.
And Kawaji says that he does not believe that Frankenstein will remember Sueko. And Kawaji now stands with those who believe Frankenstein should be killed. But He wants his heart and brain intact for research.
He's kind of mercenary, isn't he?
He's armed himself with smoke bombs that should incapacitate Frankenstein.
Long enough to get the heart and brain, I guess.
And he's going to demonstrate this. He throws one up. There's a lot of smoke. Doctors run. Sueko faints. Oh, Baragon shows up. I forgot to mention that.
Sueko tells Kawaji that if his bombs miss, he's just going to anger Frankenstein. And Kawaji says, no, let me show you. So he takes one of the little bombs out of his bag and throws it. And that has the unwanted effect of bringing Baragon up to the surface.
The doctors scatter, except for Sueko, who faints.
Bowen eventually realizes that he's running on his own and goes back for her.
And Frankenstein arrives and starts fighting Baragon.
Yeah, he's just about to eat Sueko, so he stops it.
Because that's what we signed up for.
And now the longest and possibly worst part of this movie, but also best part of this movie, begins.
Yeah, Frankenstein and Baragon are wrestling.
Baragon is awful cute. I can't take him seriously as a threat. He looks like an overgrown puppy that's just really enthusiastic to meet you. But indeed, Frankenstein and Baragon are conquering each other.
While Frankenstein and Baragon continue their brawl, Dr. Bowen and Sueko look for Kawaji, but they can't find him. He's lying nearby, but he's unconscious and rocks keep falling on him. Baragon tries to dig his way back underground and escape when Kawaji wakes up and Frankenstein sees Kawaji.
He picks him up gingerly, tenderly, and carries him over to the road where Bowen and Sueko just happen to be driving up. He gently puts Kawaji down on the ground.
Next to their rented car.
Yeah. Expensive rented car.
And he flees.
He lopes off into the woods.
Well, he's got to go back to his fight.
Right. Bowen and Sueko pick up Kawaji and help him into the car. Baragon comes upon a village evacuation, and he just sits there like a cat regarding it curiously. And then Frank comes in to wrestle some more. Baragon is adorable when he waddles. Frankenstein throws another boulder, and Baragon sets more fires. And now we're back with the Battle Royale.
And since there's no people around to be hurt, they can really get at it. Rocks are thrown, fire is breathed.
Trees are uprooted.
Frankenstein has a fire going in his cave, so he's going to fight fire with fire. He goes in and makes a couple of torches. So Frankenstein comes back with his torches and starts waving them around at Baragon. Eventually they get thrown, which starts a fire.
A forest fire. Big conflagration.
So Frankenstein keeps busy by pelting Baragon with uprooted trees.
And they do some more wrestling, etc., etc. Finally, the forest fire has reached the level where it can be seen from a distance, so the scientists know where the fight is happening. The battle still rages on. There's really no winners here. Frankenstein is trying to pry open Baragon's jaws.
And I guess this started another earthquake because Frankenstein and Baragon are sucked into the earth.
Meanwhile, everyone involved in the movie, the scientists, the army, all the villagers, run up for the very first time. They can see with their own eyes that there are two monsters.
And Sueko says that Frankenstein is finally dead. Kawaji says he can't die. His heart will live on forever. One day again, we will hear of him. And the last line goes to Dr. Bowen, who says he may be better off now. He couldn't live in this world.
He's in a better place.
So as the credits roll, we're treated to the voice of Celine Dion singing How the Heart Will Go On and On.
That didn't happen, but it is over. Hooray.
Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we are discussing Frankenstein Conquers the World from 1966. This movie had a rather long and involved development process.
It began with Toho, which had always had an idea to make a movie out of the Frankenstein character. In 1961, producer Tomoyuki Tanaka commissioned a film project called Frankenstein versus the Human Vapor. That's kind of intriguing. As a sequel to the 1960 film, The Human Vapor. But that was ultimately canceled before the draft was finished. Then in 1962, Toho purchased a script from an independent producer from America named John Beck. And that was called King Kong versus Prometheus. Beck stole the story treatment, which was originally called King Kong Meets Frankenstein, from Willis O'Brien and had George Worthing Yates flesh it out into a screenplay. Toho wanted to have King Kong fight their own monster, Godzilla, instead of the giant Frankenstein monster in the original story. But after working on a deal with Beck as well as RKO, the copyright holder of King Kong at the time produced King Kong vs. Godzilla instead.
In 1964, Henry Saperstein approached Toho to co-produce Frankenstein vs. Godzilla with his company, United Productions of America. This original story, which had the heart of the Frankenstein monster becoming irradiated and growing into a giant Frankenstein monster, and to go on to fight Godzilla, would eventually evolve into Frankenstein Conquers the World, or Frankenstein vs. Baragon.
Toho didn't like the logistics of that story, so it was dropped. And the next Godzilla movie was Godzilla vs. Mothra instead of Frankenstein.
Or the AIP version, Godzilla vs. The Thing.
It's really hard to keep all these straight. So they give it another go in 1965. They decided they would bring in a new opponent, another giant monster. This time it's Baragon to replace Godzilla as Frankenstein's opponent. And the script was altered a little bit. They kept a lot of the concepts from the original story, like the irradiated heart of the monster's relentless pursuit of food, and of course all the natural disasters at the end of the movie. And they kept a lot of the characters from the original story, such as our pal Dr. Bowen, played by Nick Adams. In the AIP version of the movie, Jerry Sohl got the credit for the synopsis, and Reuben Bercovitch got the credit for the story. This movie was the first collaboration between Toho Company Limited and Henry Saperstein, and one of the few science fiction projects made by Toho with AIP in mind. Samuel Arkoff claims that he did help finance this movie, but that's not something we could verify. Koji Furuhata earned the role of Frankenstein through an open audition. When he was playing the role, he wore green contact lenses to make him look more, Caucasian. And they built him a flat head prosthetic and heavy brow to resemble Jack Pierce's Frankenstein monster design. And of course, they put him in the oversized shirts and loincloths. I don't know how he fashioned a loincloth when he was out in the woods there, but he did. They sort of abandoned their science gone wrong movie theme in order to have the giant battle at the end.
Saperstein had requested an alternate ending for international release of the picture, in which Frankenstein would battle a giant octopus.
A giant octopus in the woods, up the mountain.
This giant octopus would defeat Frankenstein by dragging him into a lake. Apparently, this footage aired on Japanese television by mistake and has since become the official, unofficial ending to the film as Frankenstein vs. Baragon.
Think we were cheated by not getting to see that?
No, definitely.
Well, in order to even achieve this, they had to get the cast and the crew back together after principal photography and even post-production had wrapped. And then they had to build a new set and new prop to represent the giant octopus. And after all that trouble, Saperstein ended up cutting it because he didn't think it looked that good.
During its production, the film was listed in trade magazines under the title Frankenstein vs. the Giant Devilfish. So this is obviously an idea that Saperstein was really into, and it's just too bad for him that it didn't work out.
Yeah, he must have felt pretty stupid. Went to all that trouble and just had to throw it all away. Frankenstein vs. Baragon was released theatrically in Japan on August 8th, 1965, which, if you paid attention during the movie, you'll realize was 2 days after the 20th anniversary of the Hiroshima bombing. That smacks of pretty tasteless timing to me, but perhaps that's just me looking at it from a 2023 lens. The American International Pictures version was released theatrically in the United States on July 8th of 1966. And they, of course, as we have said, retitled it Frankenstein Conquers the World. Their version was dubbed in English by Titan Productions, with Nick Adams' original English dialogue being restored. It was released on a double bill with Tarzan and the Valley of Gold, but despite having two awesomely titled movies, they really only got some modest box office success from this.
The follow-up to this film was The War of the Gargantuas, which was released on July 31st, 1966. But AIP passed on this film.
Yeah, it seemed that monster movies weren't as viable as they had been previously. So when this movie was released, it was on a double bill with Godzilla vs. Monster Zero. But by this time, these kind of movies were relegated to kiddie matinees. Believe it or not, this film is a personal favorite of director Guillermo del Toro, who recommends it on Twitter and said that the monster Baragon is one of his all-time favorite kaiju. And another, believe it or not, if you want to stream this movie, or actually the Japanese version of this movie, you got to watch it on the Criterion Channel.
Several members of this cast would appear in other AIP releases, most produced by Toho. Nick Adams appeared in Die Monster Die back in 1965, not produced by Toho. Kumi Mizuno, who played Sueko Togami, had appeared in The Lost World of Sinbad in 1965, and also Attack of the Mushroom People, which was released originally as Matango in 1963, but wasn't released in America until American International released it to television as Attack of the Mushroom People in 1965.
Tadao Takashima was in Atragon back in 1963. Yoshio Tsuchiya was also in Attack of the Mushroom People, as well as Destroy All Monsters in 1968 and Yog the Monster from Outer Space in 1971. Jun Tazaki was also in Atragon, and Godzilla vs. the Thing and Dagora the Space Monster, both in 1964, as well as later on appearing in Destroy All Monsters in 1968.
Dagora the Space Monster was another one that U.S. audiences were deprived of a theatrical release, and it was released in one of American International's television packages. Susumu Fujita was in Godzilla vs. the Thing and Dagora the Space Monster, as was Keiko Sawai.
And finally, Yoshifumi Tajima was in Destroy All Monsters, Dagora, Atragon, and Godzilla vs. the Thing. So they all knew each other pretty well, I think.
So Cheryl, using our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic, how would you rate Frankenstein Conquers the World?
Regular listeners of this podcast will know that my sole judgment in selecting a grade is in how this movie made me feel. And in watching this movie, with its questionable scientific ethics, questionable special effects, sometimes rather awful dubbing, and silly giant monster fights, I can only give it the grade of A for awesome. This movie was so fun to watch. It did seem like the battle at the end dragged on a little too long, mostly because it's a lot of repetitive motions, throwing trees, throwing rocks, burrowing into the mountain, over and over, rinse, repeat. But still, it's so much fun to watch because for once, it's not two giant rubber monsters fighting each other. It's actually a human being, regardless whether he looks like a caveman or Frankenstein, whatever you decide to believe. It's a man throwing around this puppyish giant rubber monster who seems like it's having the absolute time of its life. It would probably have gone to fetch a ball if he had thrown one. And it's funny. I laughed so hard during this battle because the monster just looked so happy and I couldn't take it seriously. Yeah, maybe some people got killed, but it could have been worse. They're mostly fighting in uninhabited areas. So I'm really proud of them for taking it up the mountain and not ravaging the town the way Godzilla is wont to do. And I think the rest of the movie holds up. It's a great idea, having Frankenstein come back to life and however that happened. They didn't really explain it, but somehow this heart of Frankenstein was irradiated and now there's a new Frankenstein. And I think it's a pretty clever idea. I think it's better than just two giant monsters coming up from the ocean floor or inside a mountain and then for no good reason fighting each other. I think there's like a lot more motivation here that we can get behind. And I like the human characters even. Normally I don't really care for them, but I think that they're all trying their best to minimize the damage here. And they're kind of complex characters. They weren't just evil scientists or good scientists. They seem to be a little gray area there. So totally giving this an A. I enjoyed it. I mean, obviously it's silly and it's not something you need to take seriously, but it is a really fun way to spend an hour and a half. What about you, Jeff?
Well, my first encounter with Frankenstein Conquers the World was on Creature Features sometime in the mid-'80s on WKBD Channel 50 out of Detroit on a Saturday afternoon. And I remember looking forward to it all week because I saw that it was going to be on. And I remember being very, very disappointed with what I saw.
Aw.
I haven't seen it since, and that memory did kind of tinge my anticipated reaction. But a lot of time has passed since the mid-'80s, so I was willing to give it another go.
And we had no choice because the random movie generator made us watch this.
That's true. So yeah, Frankenstein Conquers the World's time had come. So I did try to go to it with an open mind. And I do agree with you that the people characters in this do seem to have a little more life to them than you normally see in a typical Godzilla movie or whatever. I don't know that I was any more invested in them, but they didn't seem quite as dull.
Yeah, they weren't flat, one-dimensional characters.
I found myself wondering what exactly was supposed to happen. In my research, I found that it's been said that a young boy had found the heart of Frankenstein and had eaten it.
Ew.
And this is what happened. The more common theory seems to be that because of the radiation from the atomic bomb, the heart grew appendages and a body around itself. And that seems to be, strange as it seems to say, the more logical explanation for what's happening in this film.
Admittedly, it would have been nice if the movie had tried to explain it, not left us to our own devices here.
But in my rewatch since the 1980s, I still found myself being disappointed with the Frankenstein character. I was able to give it a little more leniency in my estimation because I better understood the story that was going on and that this wasn't just supposed to be the Frankenstein that we knew from the Universal and Hammer films. This is something that evolved from that, and he's Caucasian.
It's funny how they never call him Frankenstein's monster either. He's Frankenstein, but I guess we're not in a position to...
It's a family name.
Yeah. We're not in a position to split hairs.
And I do agree that Baragon is adorable. I was rooting for Baragon the whole time. And as far as the kaiju battle, this one just kind of leaves things a little flat. It's not very exciting. I kept hoping for more. I don't know what I was hoping for.
More variety, maybe.
All in all, I'm going to give this one an I. There was some good stuff in it. I love the scene with the kids when they find the rabbit. That is the highlight of the movie for me. So there's some amusing parts, but it's just not A-worthy for me. This is an intermediate film, in my opinion.
I can understand that. And yeah, I probably should have mentioned that the Frankenstein character had no development, and there was no reason to be invested in him. It was basically a big dumb animal. He could have been a caveman. He could have been anything. Calling him Frankenstein, I don't think there's any real need for that.
It's just brand recognition.
Right. They wanted a Frankenstein character, and that's what they came up with. So they definitely could have put a little more work to him.
Yeah, maybe that's what was lacking, because Frankenstein's monster is supposed to be a character that you feel for.
Right. You empathize with him.
And I can empathize with being hungry all the time, but other than that, I didn't get much out of it.
I can empathize with being confused by life all the time, as he obviously was, in a metaphorical cage of not his own making. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I just really enjoyed. If Baragon hadn't been in this movie, definitely would have given it an I as well. But I think he rescued the film for me.
What if it had been Godzilla?
No, I don't think that would have done it for me. Godzilla is too hardcore.
Okay, what if it had been Gamera?
Yeah, I guess there's a 50-50 chance I would have enjoyed that.
Okay, well, with that, I'd say that we've conquered another episode of the American International Podcast. This is Jeff Markin.
And this is Cheryl Lightfoot.
And until next time, we'll meet you at the drive-in. Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.